please join me in welcoming Lauren and Amelia to the stage.
So it's very old news that retail is dead. I mean, this is fake news, right? We all know. We've heard all this morning that that is just not the situation.
We've been hearing about it all morning, but really it's more like retail is just going through an identity crisis, which means that the rack it, stack it type of retail model, it's not dead, it's just not needed anymore.
And what's really thriving in the stores that are opening now are things that are much more focused on active engagement, participation, and this word that we also keep hearing all day, experience. But retail's not the only thing having this kind of identity crisis. Our entire way we live now has been radically transformed by technology. So the cycle of change is much more rapid than it used to be. It's totally affected the way we interact with each other. It's affected the way we see the world, literally. And what's happening now is that in this context, stores have a totally different purpose than they used to. They're not just for buying things anymore. Now they're places to bring people together. So I'm Lauren, as Trey said, and I'm a strategy director at Gensler.
And as I said, I'm Amelia, and I'm a design director at Gensler, also a U of A grad, so go Cats. So, at Gensler, we are the world's largest design firm. We're global. We have 48 offices throughout the globe. We are also multidisciplinary. So what that means is me, as an architect, I work closely with people like Lauren, who's strategist, but also we employ people like sustainability consultants. We have even economists on staff. So all of that allows us to kind of assemble and put together the best type of team to design anything from like office towers in Shanghai to stadiums in California to hotels in Costa Rica. So at any one point during the day, 2 million people are experiencing our spaces.
And that makes us uniquely qualified to understand human behavior because they're in our spaces every day. And it allows us to really help our clients. If you're a retailer, we can help you understand trends that are happening in other sectors too. So sometimes we're seeing changes, these cultural shifts that happen before our clients do, and we can share our insights with them.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about how we see those things happening all over the world.
And so the changes that we're seeing in retail really aren't happening in a vacuum. They're very much influenced by the way we're all living our lives in other parts. We're not shopping, and so work is the place where we are most of our day. Gensler's been studying workplace and behavior and engagement in the workplace for 15 years. And we've seen some really interesting changes as we've published a survey yearly about what's driving workplace engagement and performance. Themes come out every year. So in 2008, individual performance was the big theme. People were really driven, and their workplace satisfaction was very tied to their individual performance. By 2013, there had been a shift, and people were really more focused on autonomy and choice. That was the big theme of that year's survey. In 2016, things became much more relational, and it was about your relationship to your manager. But this year, the biggest thing that came out of our survey was a sense of connectedness and belonging with your peers. So how connected did you feel to the people you worked with? There's similar data coming out of Gallup, who understands that increasingly whether you have a best friend at work is a major factor as to whether or not you'll be engaged in your job. And what this is telling us is that people are really in a sort of talent market that's so competitive right now. People are demanding that their workplace provide community for them. That's a huge thing that's happening. And when you see the rise of co-working spaces where socializing is kind of built into the mix and how successful they are, that's a huge thing that's driving people's desire to be together now that mobility and agility can allow you to basically be alone all day if that's what you want. So we're seeing that this is all happening in the midst of what people are calling a global loneliness crisis. It's been reported on widely. Governments have studied it. The UK recently actually appointed a loneliness minister to understand this problem. And even recently the New York Times published an op-ed saying that soon human contact will be a luxury good that's only available to the rich. Now, I mean, obviously this is a hot take, and that's a pretty extreme opinion, but I do think that it's sort of painting a picture where, the built environment and places where people can be together face to face are more important than ever.
I mean, and all of this is so important because it really informs the way that we approach every single one of our projects. So though I live, eat, and breathe retail day to day, I need to be influenced by all of these other things. And what it means more and more is that space is more important than ever. And for example, Roadrunners is, if you're not familiar, a group based out of New York. We just recently completed a space for them where, you don't see it in this photo, it's a community space, but in the back, upstairs, hidden in the corner, is a retail space by New Balance. And what's interesting about this model is that Roadrunners doesn't have the mission of selling product, but they formed a partnership with New Balance to become, so in a way, that New Balance store is an amenity to Roadrunners. And just last week, Roadrunners had over 4,000 people come into their space in one day. All joking aside.
Right. I mean, we do think that the role of retail is, people can joke about retail therapy, but retail really can bring people together. And so, we put it to you that as retailers, you have the opportunity to actually change and improve people's lives by creating that social platform where they can come together. And that's very much the driving force behind what we do as well. I mean, we believe truly that design has the power to improve lives. That's part of Gensler's mission, and it's core to our creative partnership as well. So Gensler is talking about customer centricity. We've been very focused on transforming our design business to something that is much more user-centric or human-centric. And as part of that initiative, we launched something called the Gensler Research Institute, and we fund our own proprietary research initiatives. They can be from anything from healthcare to sustainability to IoT. These are all things that our clients are interested in, and they're things that drive us. Now, a couple of years ago, we did a big study, which I'll tell you about today, called the Gensler Experience Index. And that was really to identify the factors of a great experience and to quantify the impact of design. But first, we really had to take this word experience, which is such a buzzword and has become almost meaningless in its overuse, and really start to put clothes on that emperor. So we did a mixed method study, initially a qualitative ethnographic study, where we went out and spent 2 hours each with 30 people across 5 markets in the US, and we had them take us to their favorite places. And we listened to them describe the experience they were undergoing in their own words, and we took from them, as people who are lay people, not in the design industry, we learned the language that they used, and we understood how they processed their experience. And from there, we developed a framework. And then we used a survey, a 5,000-person survey, representative of the US population, to confirm our framework and develop some top-line trends. And then finally, we've developed an index which will actually score individual people's experiences in places, or assign an index score of experience to a place. And we're learning over time how to apply this to spatialized data, 3D modeling, and using machine learning to help us make all of the retail environments that we design and other environments into continuous learning labs. So that's what I'll talk you through now. So our framework, after talking to all these people, we really understood that an experience is a combination of these 3 things. The expectations that you bring to the experience, so that might be your experience with the brand previously, it might be word of mouth, it might be previous time going to a place, it might be your understanding of product quality or value. Then it's the interactions that you have in that place, whether they're with technology or in a service interaction. It might even be your interactions with the other people using that space. And then, of course, there's the space itself, which is, obviously a thing that Gensler's hugely interested in. But what was interesting to us is that these 3 factors cannot really be understood as separate things by a regular person talking about their experience. So The expectations they brought to it were colored by the interactions they had, were taking place in a space. It was all one holistic continuum for us. And that allowed us to understand that the role that we play in designing space actually needs to be much bigger, and to be the authors of the experience, we need to consider these other two pieces. Now, at the center of our framework is the user's or the customer's intention. So people are participating in things for a reason, and it's that reason or intention that affects the way they process their experience and evaluate it. And people tend to be in one of these 5 modes: task, social, discovery, entertainment, or aspiration. And I'll go into those a little bit. So task mode is when you are really focused on getting something done. In task mode, people tend to be a little stressed out, not super open to distraction. They are, highly focused on accomplishing that task. And really the best thing about task mode experiences are when they're over. And when you think about this in a shopping context, this is like surgical shopping. It might be something, running errands. It might be buying a suit for a job interview. This is task shopping, very focused. Social mode is when your primary reason for engaging in experience is to really be with others. And so, when Sarah talked about shopping with her daughter, her cost center, this sounds like social shopping to me, where it might be to buy things, but really it's to engage in being with that other person. In discovery mode, this one's pretty interesting. People are very open-minded in discovery mode, and they tend to be kind of wandering or browsing with no actual intended purpose. When people were in discovery mode, they were having the best experiences, they were the most open-minded, and it was the most easy time to change their mind about a brand. 72% of people in our survey who reported being in a store with no intention to buy as they were wandering in a discovery mindset made a purchase, which is like an amazing conversion rate. So I think the idea of capturing people when they're open and least expecting it is something that we want to try to flip people into as much as we can. Entertainment mode is pretty self-explanatory. It's when you want to be taken out of your regular everyday life and entertained. And in this mode, the user can sometimes be a little bit more passive. And then aspiration mode is hugely important. Terry mentioned earlier in our talks that people are coming to him routinely and saying, well, what's your mission socially? And so when you're sort of participating in something in aspiration mode, you want to be connected to something bigger than yourself. You might be in a moment of self-transformation. And in a retail context, this might be when you're shopping a brand that does have an extremely strong social mission or helps you achieve some kind of self-transformation. We noted that these 5 modes are not mutually exclusive across an experience. People might be toggling among them. Think about when you're in an airport. You're in task mode until you get through security, and then you're much more open to be social, to maybe wander around and discover. This is how these modes work. And we also noticed that if people went to the same place in a different mindset with a different mode, they often experience that place radically differently. Even more important, the places where a person could return to in lots of different modes and have a great experience were the ones that they called their favorite place. So for example, in our ethnographies, a woman took us to Italy, and she described how she could buy specialty items that she couldn't get anywhere else, so that was sort of her task shopping experience. She frequently went there with her husband or with clients to have a drink at the rooftop bar. She loved that they cooked right in front of you, which was hugely entertaining. She loved to kind of wander around and discover, like, ooh, weird Italian candies, how cool. And finally, every time she went, she was reminded of her honeymoon with her husband when they went to Tuscany. So it was really, this Italy place was her favorite because it was really firing on all cylinders in every mode for her. And that's really helped us think about how to make spaces as multimodal and as satisfying in every headspace as possible. So we also learned some concrete data about what headspace or mindset people were in when they were in a retail context. And you can see that about half the time they're shopping in task mode, and about the other half of the time they're shopping in all of the other modes. So let's start with that 49% task mode. This is not fun shopping. This is like buying toothpaste, and it's the shopping that has primarily been disrupted by digital technology and other things. I mean, Doug's entire talk today was about solving task mode elegantly at Walmart. And I think that, you know, when you solve task mode elegantly, you open the door to putting your customers into the other, more satisfying modes. And so that's something that we're always keeping in mind. Also, we learned some interesting demographic information. The older you get, the more likely you are to be shopping in task mode. So you can see only 37% of millennials were in task mode while shopping in our survey, whereas 55% of baby boomers were shopping in task mode, or were shopping in task mode 55% of the time. And you can bet that those millennials who were in task mode while shopping were the ones that have kids. You know, the other thing that we learned is that the more you were shopping in task mode, the less likely you were to be having a great experience. And so it really is so important to earn people's right to go into these other modes by solving tasks. It makes your brand, I think, much more inclusive as well. Because even though millennials are, you know, the generation of the future, the baby boomers are still the people with the disposable income. So let's make sure everyone gets a great experience. So now let's talk about that other 51%, the non-task mode moments. This is fun shopping. This is shopping with your friends. This is, you know, all the stuff that people love about retail or have traditionally loved about retail. And, you know, when you take task away, which we think is going to be happening more and more frequently, you know, it's the other modes that are left, the much more satisfying ones. But what happens then is that your competition is not other retailers anymore. It's pretty much anything a person would want to do in their spare time. So now you're competing with tickets to Hamilton, or a cool art installation, or a great trip, you know, to Salt River tubing, or, you know, a fun night at a bar. And it's a completely different landscape now.
I think this part is so important. I just wanted to, because as we were talking all morning about, you know, being overstored, a question has come to us, like, what is the definition of a store? You know, is that just the interface where a brand is connecting with their consumer in physical space? But we can really, you know, we see that evolving into other things.
Right. I mean, now a store needs elements of theatricality or hospitality to really compete and to bring that experience. So how are people doing, you know, how's retail doing in this competitive landscape? Well, it looks like there's a lot of room to improve right now. I mean, as of our survey, more people reported having fun at work than they did while shopping. So, you know, I don't think that it's that work got more fun. I do think, though, that it's that work is increasingly becoming a place to build community, as we showed, and retail has that opportunity too. And when you look at things like unplugging or doing something exciting or learning something new, again, retail was sort of underperforming in these categories when compared to public space or workplace or hospitality. And so what that tells us is that once you've right-sized your store portfolio and you've solved tasks, the stores that are left can do a lot of really cool things. When you give people more to do than shop, we think they're going to shop more. So now that we have, you know, collected all of this experience understanding, how is that actually changing the way our designers do their work?
Yeah, and this is where Lauren and I, you know, connect directly. So when we work on projects, we overlap. But really, what has influenced me completely as a designer is that typically, or, you know, in the past, when starting a retail project, a client has come with us with a list of demographics, right? So we want to appeal to this set, we want to appeal to this type of person. But now, in a world where you need to appeal to everyone, this framework really allows us to not think about a certain type of person and to silo them. Instead, we're really thinking about the mindset of a person throughout the course of their life. And this changes, this really expands how we design our spaces and our process, but it's a different way of looking at design traditionally, if anyone here has worked with a retail designer.
So a really interesting thing that happened on our ethnographies, people took us to all kinds of places. We had people take us to things on the low end, we had people take us to things on the high end, and we really were looking in our ethnographies to engage with people. We specifically recruited for people who either said they were totally not interested in design and experience, wouldn't pay more for it, didn't care about it, and people who said it was hugely important to them and it was driving their decision making. And I will tell you that those people were equally sophisticated, equally articulate about describing their experience. Design was super important even to the people who said it wasn't important to them. They just didn't feel comfortable commenting on style. But they noticed all of the environmental decisions that were made around them by the store, by the designers, about SKUs, about queuing. They got all of it. So there were some interesting, huge sort of contrasts. There was a guy who took us to Costco. He said, this is my favorite store experience. It's totally authentic to me because no one designed it, which is kind of hilarious. But what was interesting to us is that he really felt empowered by the fact that he perceived that he was in a space with no design. It made him feel super in control. It made him feel like all the products were much more valuable because no one was spending money on overhead. And it really, for someone like Amelia, to look at this as this is not a less interesting design challenge.
No, absolutely not. And I think everyone here in the room knows that it takes just as much effort to design a Costco as it does a Bergdorf Goodman's. Much time goes into it. But it was really interesting, as a designer, it's kind of be involved at this level, like in this process, and really sort of hear one-to-one this person's perception of the space, that, what value he felt at Costco, whereas the woman who took us to Bergdorf Goodman was actually really interesting to me, is that she spent a lot of time online really selecting the item that she wanted, which was a handbag. But she really wanted to make sure she was getting the best price. She wanted to know, anything that might be on sale, like what was the resale value. But what was really important to her is that she actually make the purchase in store. And so to me, that was sort of like an aha moment, because now I'm starting to think about, the service component, because that is also part of what she's purchasing in a way. She wanted to see them wrap the handbag. Now that's really directly informing me, like how am I designing that space in order for that interaction to really happen.
Another thing that we're doing now that we've collected this data as well is we're starting to spatialize it. So we're taking our BIM models, which is the Building Information Modeling program, that spatializes in 3D places, and it takes all of the data that a building might be throwing off and puts it into this one model. So in a retail setting, you can put in all of your SKU data, you can put in RFID data, you can track where your salespeople are, all of that stuff. What we've been able to do is take our experience survey, sort of shrink it to the smallest number of responses that can generate an actual index score, and we've been tying our individual consumer research to a physical place in the store. So what you see in this BIM model, the white line is the customer's journey. The white dots are where they paused. The pink stuff is how much they could see in their field of vision, and the red area is how long they dwelled in that place. And what this is allowing us to understand is a huge number of things. So we can see now a live customer journey in real time. We can see what effect a sales interaction had on the person. We can see when they switched from being in task mode to being in discovery mode, for example, and understand what was in their field of vision when they did that, what were the SKUs that they were around. We can also start to understand what specific brand features were present in the store that might make them have a different response in the environment. And we can generate an individual score per customer journey now. So we're getting extremely individualized information on each shopper, which is really cool. So we've done this so far. This is pretty new. We've done it in a retail flagship. We're about to do it in a mixed-use development, so it's kind of more of a different kinds of people in space story. And we're doing it in a workplace headquarters. And so, I think the other thing that's important, of course, is you probably want to see some of the work. And when, you're now designing for experience-led retail, spaces turn out to be pretty different. They also might have different KPIs. You might not be selling things in these stores in the way that you used to be. Or if you are, you might be having a lot of other experiences around that selling. So Amelia's going to take you through the rest of our work.
Yeah, so now I get to talk. But what really engages us as designers is we like to design spaces that influences people's lives. And this project specifically is for Hyundai Capital Card. I don't know if anyone's familiar, but it's a credit card in Korea. And this is a music library space that we designed and developed the program alongside with Hyundai. But Hyundai wanted to create a space where they could interact with their customer, their card-carrying members, but they don't sell anything to the card-carrying members. There's no transaction that happens here. But what it is it's a community building for them to really sort of bring people together and for them to interact with their customer, but it's also for their customers to interact with each other. And I think that's actually really powerful, is really integrating that social element into all of our spaces, because that ultimately, people who shop together buy more. But Hyundai Music Library is, it's a really curated experience. There's recording studios, there's a stage underneath, there's an outdoor performance area. You can come and listen to records. I think they bought Rolling Stones record collection. But it's this idea of really creating what we would call a retail space, but really sort of questioning what is retail now. Another space that is near and dear to us that we are also working on is Cadillac House. So this was recently completed. This is in New York City, in Soho. When working with Cadillac in relocating their headquarters to New York and designing their workspace above, the opportunity came up for Cadillac to take a piece of the ground floor level. And they jumped at the opportunity, but at the same time, they weren't quite sure what were the possibilities and the potential here. So Cadillac is not a dealer, and even if they were, they couldn't deal cars here. It wasn't a showroom, but instead we worked closely with them to develop a space that really reflected their brand pillars. And with Cadillac going through a real brand transformation, this was a space for them to engage with a new customer set and to really embed themselves into the local neighborhood. And so part of the program is a coffee shop, so they engage in a local partnership with Joe's Coffee. They have a showroom space where the cars are displayed. There's a retail lab in the space, so they can engage other up-and-coming fashion designers to come and sell their clothing.
Partnership with CFDA.
CFDA, exactly. And there's also an art gallery space in the back. So,
which is curated by Visionaire. So they have really cool brand partnerships.
There you go. So with that, we have a video that kind of shares a little bit more about the space, but also something that we were hearing this morning is sort of like, what's the return on investment? And it's true, like we need new ways of really measuring what's the give back, or like what makes it worth. So let's take a look at that.
Introducing Cadillac House, a transformative space that places the brand at the heart of design, art, fashion, and film. Cadillac House has become a center of culture in Lower Manhattan. It's a runway, a gallery, a retail lab, and a public meeting space where innovators and creators come to inspire one another. In less than 1 year, the numbers already tell the story. Welcome to Cadillac House.
What's kind of interesting about Cadillac House is that it wasn't planned for by Cadillac, but after it opened, it became very clear to them really quickly they needed a program manager. And this is actually something that we've started to integrate in our earlier conversations with clients, that creating these experiential retail environments that creates a different type of staff member that you need on hand and on your location. So that if you really are going to deliver these new rotating experiences to your clients, someone needs to be there thinking about that and planning it and organizing it. And with Cadillac House, that was the partnership with Visionaire that ended up resulting, because they really needed that presence. Adidas, as we were mentioning, was another one of our projects that we recently completed in New York City. What was interesting about this project was this was the first flagship for Adidas. Though they were very well-established retailers globally, they've never had a flagship location, and they decided that New York was going to be their first one. It's on Fifth Avenue. Fifth Avenue is sort of becoming this little hotbed of athletic brands, which is another interesting cultural shift we're seeing. But Adidas asked us to create their first global flagship, but what was really important is that it be the purest form of the brand, right? So if your customer is going to come in their case, the creator, this is where they're going to really experience what Adidas is going to dictate as like that brand expression. So we worked closely with them, but this is a typical, I would say, selling retail space. But what was really important about this is that it sort of really reflected this American notion of stadium. And this concept we recently just opened up in Beijing. And so speaking to like looking at things globally, really taking that, what was, embedded in New York City and American, but translating that across the world and something, and now they really perceive the Beijing store as performing better than the New York store. So with that, we'd like to kind of leave you guys with another video that gives you a little bit clips of some behind the scenes of what it takes to kind of build one of these stores. Flagships operate at a loss on Fifth Avenue. And given that, when we started working with Adidas, we convinced them to kind of dedicate the whole ground level to experience. So no product or very little sold at all. And in their first quarter, they were operating at a profit. And so I think that that's a big learning lesson, that if you bring people to not shop, then they will shop. So, yeah, thank you guys. Any questions?
So you touched briefly, you know I'm a geek on numbers, but you touched briefly on this return on investment, and I'd love to sort of hear if you have a few ways that your clients are thinking about this, because, you know, obviously the Hyundai car, you know, not having any sort of measurement, but they've got to be measuring people visiting, or how are they looking at this, because it's obviously quite a large investment.
Yeah, and I think with Adidas, for example, we approached us and said, treat us like a work in progress. Therefore, you know, that gave us that let them give us permission to really take big risks, and if it didn't work, then we could sort of redo it. And in that way, not only we were sort of expecting, you know, that they would, you know, we would make mistakes or something and we would go back and transform it. Instead, it's quite the opposite. They're operating at a profit. So in that way, Adidas is measuring it, you know, money per square foot. But I think that
with Cadillac, I mean, some of the stats that you saw flashed up there were really the KPIs that they were measuring. So it was things like dwell time, earned media impressions, shares on social media, and that space, which was sort of more of a community living room than anything else, was really like what they considered, I think, the thin edge of the wedge into a much longer strategy to engage a younger, you know, they called them the creative class, but a younger customer. And this is, you know, the first step in what is a multi-year strategy to, you know, that will eventually be built on with car design and other things. But that was really what they were after, was dwell time, repeat visitation, sharing, and in general, you know, could they get people who would have never thought about Cadillac to now consider that car?
New York Roadrunners, the example we shared earlier, they measure it purely on footfall. Roadrunners puts on the New York City Marathon, and they operate races every single weekend, but you can get your race bib the day of the race. But the idea that everyone is coming out of their way into their community hub, and that directly informs their relationship with New Balance. That Roadrunner space is 5,000 square feet, and one day they did over 4,000 people, as I mentioned. Totally insane. We're actually working with them again now to kind of figure out operations, including restrooms. But I think that, you know, that's a really interesting problem to have, though I think that we still, with each brand, continue to kind of redefine, like, what are their expectations?
Right, and I think in general with experience-led projects, you know, it's really up to the company to define what their success metrics are, and they're going to be kind of different every time. So, you know, in a sort of new workplace headquarters, you know, the experience metrics that they might want to lead with is something like, how often are people colliding with people who are not part of their regular network, because their main driver might be, say, innovation. Whereas, you know, a traditional way to measure the performance of a large building might be density. And so making things experience-led naturally changes what the KPIs are that you set at the beginning of the project.
Hi, what are your thoughts on pop-up shops, and how are you applying your research to that?
We do quite a few pop-up shops, in fact.
So I mean, what's interesting about pop-up, and I think that it's an indicator more broadly, is that, you know, now that you're looking at the success of these multimodal spaces, I think what you're seeing is that even fixed stores have an amount of flexibility. Like no single-use space is important anymore. It's really about creating ultimate flexibility. And pop-up shops are, you know, one very clear manifestation of that kind of flexibility. So I think that what you see, and Amelia, you can talk about this more, is that your clients just want this ultimate flexibility to act like a pop-up inside a fixed store all the time.
Yeah, I was gonna say we almost treat it like pop-ups within the greater store. To us, it's just the cycle and what the client wants to invest, really.
Thank you for the awesome presentation. It was great. Do you find there are more establishments like the Italy in Milan being popped up here in America?
Oh, yes. And also, I think we hear a lot of clients say, we want to be the Italy for fill in the blank. You know, I think we're also seeing more broadly, as a design trend, even outside of retail, I think we're seeing, for example, in our commercial office practice, that there's sort of a mixed usification that's happening to ground floor podiums, for example, where that food hall feeling or that multi-vendor or that pop-up-like experience is providing a better amenity potentially for the people in the building who are tenants, but also the neighborhood in general.
Yeah, I would say we're seeing food halls pop up everywhere, not just urban, but suburban spaces. They're almost like a fail-safe, it seems like, because they have this sort of like inherent, like organic nature to them, so that they can, you know, Italy is really, you know, an anchor tenant in a way.